All right. Wish a very warm welcome to all the participants. At the outset, we'd like to thank you for taking out time to participate in this LinkedIn Live, where we'll be launching the pricing index. Do feel free to share where all of us are joining from. Look forward to your questions, comments, and let's keep this interactive. Just some context on what we plan to cover in the next 45 to 50 minutes. This LinkedIn Live is all about the pricing index. So, we'll talk about the need for some kind of a pricing index, which is easily accessible, fact-based, standardized, and can be compared, contrasted. What's really the genesis of our thought behind it. We'll also cover what the index is composed of and the locations we plan to cover as part of that. The data and methodology behind the index. I think we'll take a bit of a while to talk through that as well, because that forms a core aspect of the usability and defensibility of such an index. And then we'd also want to update you on the upcoming release and frequency of updates that you can expect for the index. But before that, let's do a round of introductions of the panelists. My name is Abhishek Sharma. I'm a partner with the firm and co-lead our pricing assurance practice globally, based out of the New Delhi area in India. I've been about 8 years with the firm. Rahul Gani.
Yes, thanks, Abhishek. Hi, everyone. My name is Rahul Gehani, also known as RG, given that we have got two Rahuls in the panel today. I'm also a partner with Everest Group, based out of our Delhi NCR office. Uh, Co-head our pricing assurance service line along with Abhishek. And I'll hand it over to the other Rahul.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Abhishek. Hi, everyone. Great to connect with you all. My name is Rahul Barve, a Vice President here at Everest Group, part of the same team, Pricing Assurance, with Abhishek and Rahul, and I lead some of the engagements on the BPO services. Again, based out of Delhi, NCR region, and yeah, look forward to talk about the pricing index.
Absolutely,
Abhishek?
and I think it behooves us now to use RB and RG, right, respectively. I've actually, as a side note, I've grown up having too many Abhisheks in my class, but now it's actually Rahuls who rule the roost. So good stuff in that. Okay, I think we'll get to the index, but RG, what a roller coaster ride this has been for pricing between, if I were to compare mid 2021 and mid 2023. Cost pressures I know have made 2023 much more interesting, but it's been almost like a hairpin bend of sorts, right, in terms of how pricing behaviors have moved overall.
Yes, absolutely, Abhishek. I mean, if we kind of look at it right from 2021 H2, we were in a situation where uh, demand for IT services, BPO services was booming absolutely, and after a lot of after I don't know how many years, we were in a phase where pricing specifically was expanding. It was going up, and as we kind of entered 2022, the same situation was continuing. A situation of a secular demand surge. Buyers or enterprises trying to diversify their portfolios. They had so much of demand from various business units to kind of do more on the IT side, more on the BPO side. Hence, the need to kind of get more service providers into the fray. Um, as we kind of got into, let's say, the Q1 of 2022, that's when we started seeing a little bit of a change, in the signs. There were some early talks of stagflation or recession, though they were not very prominent at that stage. But that was also the time when the geopolitical risks kind of started increasing. With the situation in Ukraine starting to change. But however, demand kind of still remained robust, and across the board, we saw service providers reporting a pretty bulging deal pipeline. so to say. By the time we reached quarter two of 2022, things were starting to kind of worsen. Inflation was surging globally. Europe specifically was impacted by an energy crisis. And in response, we saw interest rate hikes across various developed countries, all over the world. Uh, this was a time when people started talking about an increased likelihood of a recession as well, and there were some signs of a buyer decision making slowdown, in certain pockets. By the time we hit quarter three of last year, we started hearing about things like modernization fatigue. Organizations have been doing so much of modernization, so much of transformation. They need to now take a pause and start to kind of reap the benefits of what they have already invested in. um, and even from the perspective of talent, which was kind of in a very rocky phase, you know from 2021, till a good part of 2022, where demand was really surging, and there was just not enough supply available. We started seeing that at least attrition had started stabilizing, by Q3 of 2022. And as we ended the year, as we ended 2022, it was a situation of, sustained global economic slowdown, recession almost a certainty, buyer priorities kind of getting reprioritized, delays in a lot of new initiatives getting commissioned, more focus on cost management and value efficiency in deals. Broadly speaking, if we now look at where we are today, and how things were, let's say when we started 2022, overall a very stark difference. We talked about demand was surging at that stage. Right now, it is a stage where demand is definitely slowed down. Uh, that time it was from a talent perspective an employees market, and now employees had multiple job offers in hand. Enterprises were finding it difficult to hire people. Even service providers were finding it difficult to hire people. Now it's not the same thing anymore. At least not for all of the skill sets. For some of the skill sets that might still persist, but for a lot of the skill sets and technologies, the situation is much more amenable. Where we were in a stage of buyers trying to diversify their portfolio, now we are kind of seeing the opposite. A lot of the buyers that we are in conversations with, they are in the process of consolidating, rationalizing their portfolios. So that's the kind of roller coaster, or the hairpin bends that we have been through for the last about 15-18 months. um, RB, I know that a number of our clients are keen to get a directional sense of what the next 12 months also hold for us. What do you think is actually, what are the main parameters which are kind of driving the market trends in 2023?
Couple of things, RG. So one, definitely the cost pressure, right? Given the overall, recessionary environment, the overall economic outlook across some of the major geographies, right, that you already mentioned, right? A lot of enterprises, the leadership mandates, transpired towards cutting cost. That essentially meant that the burden, right, was passed to the procurement teams, right, to reduce the overall outsourcing spend, which again meant that now enterprises want to know how should they plan their budgets, right. Second, many of these contracts, that were signed in 2022, had a heavier cola, that was negotiated because of the overall talent situation then. So now enterprises are again, mulling over options. How do they minimize that impact, right, of cola, right? So overall, just the trend seems to be on, putting pressure on the overall pricing. Haji.
Yeah. Thanks, RG and RB. Overall, if our one of the takeaways I think over the past few minutes has been that in any situation which is fast changing, right, there's a desire to know what the actual magnitude of change has been, because there could be different voices in the market. So trying to bring some coherence into that, and I think more importantly, really, the U-turn or hairpin situations, both enterprises and service providers would want to know, with a good degree of certainty, what the next 12 months hold like, right? Of course, it's very difficult to go deep into each situation, but at least from a directional perspective, I think the need is quite common across, both enterprises and service providers. I think now seems to be the right time to get into the genesis of the thought around such an industry standard pricing index. So yeah, uh, let's maybe talk a little bit about that.
Right. So if we kind of look at it, we can start with the question, what is the need for having any kind of a pricing index, right? And the context for this can be understood by looking at the results that we're showing on this particular chart, right? These are the results of the key issue study that we conduct at the beginning of each year to understand what are the business challenges that enterprises across the world are dealing with. And if you look at the chart, invariably you can see three of the top five business challenges, that exist in 2023, they are linked to pricing pressure. One of them is directly around pricing, as it says, price and cost pressure. The other two are kind of factors which are kind of, I'll say, supporting factors, which are kind of building up that price and cost pressure, because we see a slowdown in demand, which is kind of marked by that red ellipse. Essentially, enterprises all over the world are seeing that, as far as their own uh, clients are concerned, they're not showing as much of a demand for the services or the products, as was the case, let's say, last year. There's also a definite slowdown in the customer decision making that enterprises are seeing. You know, both of them are kind of adding to pressure, on enterprises, in the sense, if the revenue projections do not seem too strong, they need to definitely be more efficient when it comes to the costs that they are incurring. As far as that translating to, what we're talking about from the perspective of IT services or BPO services, that's something which is then passing on pretty directly to the service providers in the IT and the BPO space. So, broadly speaking, you know, though it's not a surprise that we are seeing this kind of a cost pressure or price pressure, because to some extent, even in the previous years, this has always been there, but the intensity of this has only increased in the last 3 to 6 months. In more and more conversations that we're having with our enterprise side clients, as well as clients that we're dealing with, who are service providers, we have heard about a desire to see some very defensible and directional guidance on what has been the pricing movement, in the last 12 months, and how similar or how different is that to what we have seen, let's say, even in the previous quarters. So that's a bit of the context as far as I see it.
I completely agree, RG, right? The demand is certainly there, but somehow the industry does not have a index which is, practical or usable and which is linked to pricing currently. There are many on the cost side, but nothing really on the pricing. And to be clear, the cost impact is not same as the price movement, right? So what do you think, Abhishek? We have not really seen anything which is directly applicable here in the market.
Yeah, and good points, RG and RB. See, interestingly, on the cost side, right, there are um, there are many, right, across. They could be cost of living. It could be just overall cost increase. Wage inflation of sorts. There's a dime a dozen, right? But at the same time, it's important also not to mix these two, right? Because cost can simply not be used as a proxy right? So that, otherwise we run a high risk of suboptimal outcomes, right? And honestly, an index based on actual deal data, actual pricing, right, which is closely linked, is hard to come by. I'll maybe take a couple of use cases or examples. I'm reminded of a large public sector BPO deal that we recently advised. It was a 10-year deal with a year-on-year COLA adjustment built in, and we observed almost like a 33% increase in the price on account of COLA for the ninth year as compared to the first year. Frankly, the average market pricing has not increased to the same proportion, which brings home the point that the cost element is just one part of the price, right? Yes, one might say that it's related somewhat, but pricing would also be dependent not just on the cost increases, but also the competition, the market dynamic, a lot of other things which may not fit in very well like a well-made jigsaw puzzle, right? There will still be some things which are unexplained, and that can only be reflected in an index which is based on pricing and not a build-up of what costs might look like, right? The second thing also is that, see, one of the risks with looking at only cost is that what kind of a cost inflation is that index talking about? Is it wages? If it's wages, what kinds of wages? If it's wages plus other things, it just leads to a lot of different kind of interpretations, which could be a risk. So again, never really seen something which addresses pricing changes per se, and I think that's been the one of the genesis behind us trying to kind of put something together. One of the caveats which I also want to acknowledge, right, or mention, is that for actual negotiation or contracting, right, be it enterprises, service providers, one definitely needs detailed benchmarks, right? It's not something which can just be done by an index. Full disclosure, let's be clear. Having said that, both enterprises and providers at times need some guidance on actual expected movement to inform any directional or preliminary planning before getting deep inside the decision making. Right, and I think that's where the pricing index comes into play, because you don't need to get all the detail to start thinking. It's just that once that thinking is shaped, that's when perhaps one would really need the detailed insights. So that's also some context which I wanted to share in terms of where the pricing index fits in.
Yep, that's a good point, Abhishek. And stakeholders, don't necessarily need such an index for each and every function, that they have in their portfolio, or each and every geography where they are kind of having presence in. As far as I see it, a right balance of directional input, which is fact based, around some of the key IT and BPO functions. I think that's the critical part. And one use case is often around. See, I hold a certain budget. I'm part of XYZ organization. I would like to understand, over the next 12 months, how much of a budget increase should I expect, at an overall portfolio level. So that's one of the use cases that we have kind of come across in our own discussions. Uh, I'd like to ask our participants also, in this LinkedIn Live, to comment in the chat window, if they have in different situations felt the need for an easily accessible index, in this respect. You can type your responses in the chat window, um, and basically, do you believe that an index that tracks pricing for IT or BPO services, will it be helpful to you or not? And if the answer is yes, you can also mention, in what different types of use cases will you find it useful. And while we kind of wait for some answers to come in the chat, just wanted to share that in a lot of closed room discussions with different types of stakeholders and in enterprises, like sourcing leaders, or vendor management leaders or CIOs, we have often felt the need for a pricing index to figure out, whether the pricing in the deals was broadly trending in the same way as the wider market or not, or was it that their providers were trying to ask for a higher price increase as compared to what the market is generally witnessing. Even on the service provider side, we have seen sometimes, leaders on the pricing side, leaders on the solutioning side, account managers, BU heads, they have at different points in time mentioned a similar requirement, where a pricing index could be useful for them. Um, okay. RB,
Yeah.
by now I am sure the audience would want to get a few more details about, what we have in this index. So do you want to share some of the information?
Sure, sure. Let's actually go to go to the pricing index, right, and share more details around it, right. So first thing, what essentially the price index covers, right? So it covers the actual price movement over the past 12 months for three key service categories, which means that the price index, which means the price index for Yeah, which essentially means the price index for H1 2023, which is going to be released soon, will be covering the average price index for H1 2023 and compare it with the H1 2022, right? Essentially provide a view of the historical trend for the 12 months for that particular service category. It also covers the projected price movement for the next 12 months, right? So it will be also providing the projected price index for H1 2024. Okay. Along with that, it will also cover three most important pricing themes that we are currently observing, or essentially the opportunities that the enterprises or service providers can foresee in the near future. Not just this, so this pricing index will be covered across six key delivery locations. That is two onshore locations of US and UK. It will also cover two nearshore locations of Poland and Mexico, as well as two offshore locations of India and Philippines, right? For each of these three service categories, right? And broadly, I mean, if you look at the six delivery locations, they cover most of the outsourcing delivery spend that we have right currently. The another important aspect is on the service categorization. So Archie, do you want to spend some time talk about the definitions of these three service categories that we'll be covering?
Yeah, absolutely. So, see, over the last 3 to 4 years, whenever we analyzed how the pricing of IT and BPO services has trended, we realized that it's very rare and almost impossible for one broad secular trend to be true for all types of IT and BPO services. For example, even last year, while the pricing was rising in general, there were certain skills like Java, .NET, manual testing, where prices were increasing for sure, but at a muted pace as compared to some of the other services like cloud, analytics, cybersecurity, where they were rising much faster. So what we realized is that the pricing index has to be broader than just one number that will be applicable for all types of services. At the same time, it's not practical to uh, come up with different indices for, you know 20 different categories of services as well, because then it will not be practical for enterprises or service providers to kind of follow them, and make decisions smoothly based on such a widely dispersed set of indices. We finally took a balanced approach of segregating the services into three categories. As Rahul said, the first is what we call the IT standard services. Which includes traditional functions under IT infrastructure services such as service desk, traditional compute, storage, as well as application development and application maintenance services across some of the uh, traditional or generic technologies like Java, C++, .NET, etc. So that's the first one, which is IT standard services. The second one is what we call IT advanced services, and this essentially refers to some of the higher skill functions, such as cybersecurity, cloud services, or when it comes to application development and maintenance, full stack cloud-based development, or data sciences as well. And the third one, which is around BPO, essentially is a bucket of common voice and back office business processes such as accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing, employee administration, customer service operations, claims processing, so on. So with these being the broad definitions, I would also like to ask our audience, what they believe is the future outlook for the pricing for these services. Do you expect prices for IT standard services to go up, remain stable, or go down? Likewise for the advanced services as well as the BPO services. Looking forward to seeing your inputs on the chat windows.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. So Rahul, I think one, as we wait for the responses to come in, one of the questions also by one of the participants is, the reason why South Africa was not included, and that's a fair question. Basically, this a couple of things. One, this is a complementary, sort of a report which we aim to, release every 6 months. And as part of that, while the intent is to cover as much as possible, there's also a line that we need to draw, just to see where, perhaps maximum of the work goes, from an overall volume perspective, so that, it's usable across, not in every situation, but as much situations as possible. Just bearing that, that's why we decided on two onshore, two offshore, and two nearshore geographies, and that's the rationale. Otherwise, there's no specific reason why to keep a particular country out, but just thought we'd share, our logic behind using the six countries that we have up there.
yep. And I think one interesting response which has come with regard to the pricing outlook is that prices will fall. There'll be more utilization of shared services, multi-tower deals, high productivity, lots of automation. So completely agree with the point of view. We do see that enterprises are not just focusing on getting the unit prices down. They are really expecting the providers to step up the game as far as increasing productivity is concerned. In spite of all the advances that have happened in the automation area, there are still some accounts where we see that providers have not passed on a lot of automation related benefits. So agree with the point of view. Okay, let's move on to how we arrive at this index and some of the values that we see in the current time frame.
Sure. Thanks, Arji. So, while we've talked about the genesis of the index, what the components are, I'm sure a question comes as to, how do we really arrive at that? Because the quality of any metric or any index is only as strong as the underlying rigor and data, underpinning it, right? In that context, I just want to highlight a few things. One, all of this is based on actual deal or contract information. As a practice, as a pricing practice, it's been over 14 years as a dedicated unit within Everest Group, and the numbers, I won't go through each one of them, kind of speak for themselves. Just hundreds of deal scenarios across IT business services, almost 500,000 contemporary pricing data points, and then of course the rigor and normalization, contextualization it gets combined with, leads us to a treasure trove of not just data, but also the insights around how things have moved, from one to the other. What's the direction of movement we're seeing, as we're about to, as we release this, even the future outlook is based not just on hearsay or rumors. It's also, the directional changes that we see, along with a lot of our view on where the macroeconomic environment, and supplier behavior, supplier client behavior could be. So in a way, the insights, are from the billions of dollars of IT BPO spend benchmarked by the team, literally coming together to make this a practical, accurate, and focused metric, which can be used very easily by stakeholders across enterprises and service providers, accessible on a regular basis, which can be compared, contrasted, and again, to be used more as, an initial preliminary view to guide any analysis or planning purposes. For detailed purposes, of course, there's a host of, detailed analysis, which can be had. Now, if you look at the IT standard services, right, and I'll just describe how we typically read this. What we've done is that for the H1 2023 report, which will come out, we indexed the average price for H1 2022 to 100, and we said, hey, if we create that index as 100, what does the H1 2023 index look like, which will then represent the movement over the past 12 months. And if you look at both USA and India, right, the movement, the index has moved up by 2.6% and kind of 3.1% or units respectively, right? So that I think is also reflected in the fact that there's been significant kind of movement. It's also seen some kind of inflation, but the numbers, as you see, the average is lower as compared to the advanced services, just by nature of what the service mix contains. Now, the forward looking view is interesting because while we do see some increase further to 103.1, and you can see it's nowhere close to the increase seen in the past 12 months in the US. In India, it actually is expected to flatten out and even go down a little, right? So that's why you see that yellow horizontal bar, which describes the direction of movement. So that's how this index is going to be represented. There's going to be a baseline which is indexed to 100, then the current movement, which in this case is H1 2023, and then the forward-looking view for H1 2024. Something that's easy to read, easy to understand, and gives a numerical, quantitative view on that movement. So while the numbers are relatively, if I may say, pedestrian, especially in the forward-looking view for standard services, RJ, on the advanced services side, I know the past 12 months have definitely seen more of a movement. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, Abhishek. So the reason why we have seen a higher movement in prices in the last 12 months for the IT advanced services, and that actually is also the reason why we continue to see prices will rise further, and more so as compared to what we are seeing in the case of standard services, is firstly, if you look at it from the perspective of the service providers, there is still a good demand that they see coming from clients for the advanced services, and we're talking about, again, as a recap, services such as cloud migration, analytics, cyber security, full stack development, so on and so forth. So there's a good amount of demand that is still there. At the same time, while the overall talent situation is not as bad as it was last year, but still, it's not in a situation where there's an ample pool of talent available which can simply be hired from the market. Talent for these kind of skills or technologies is still in short supply. So from a service provider perspective, the costs or the salaries are still increasing for these kind of services. From the enterprise perspective also, the moment we start talking about cybersecurity, analytics, or these kind of services, the focus is not as much on getting the costs down. Focus is on what is the ultimate value or the benefit that the business can achieve, from initiatives that include these kind of technologies, and ensuring a high quality of outcomes, reducing the risk, not cutting corners because of getting the pricing down by $1, $2. I think that is of paramount importance. Hence, we see that compared to the standard services, there is a material gap in to the extent to which the prices already increased this year in H1 2023, and even in the next 12 months, we expect them to increase further. For example, in USA, compared to an H1 2022 price of 100, we would expect to see a price of 107 12 months from now. And in India, compared to an index price of 100, we would see something on the lines of 106.6. So that's the uh, broad rationale. RB, you are the SME when it comes to BPO pricing. So what's your read of the pricing over there?
Yeah. So, Aji, when it comes to the, some of the transaction BPO services, that we have assessed, we certainly expect that the pricing will moderate in the next 12 months, right? Compared to, what we saw in the previous 12 months, right? So, in the previous 12 months, right, we are seeing within USA, right, the index is around 103.1, right? So, almost 3% increase in the average pricing, right? Similarly, in India also, we saw around the index is around 102.9, right? So around 2.9%. However, when we talk about the future outlook, we expect that the pricing for both USA and India should actually decrease marginally, right, in the next 12 months. And if I talk about some of the numbers, right, if you look at the index, right, there's a marginal decrease of zero point 0.1 unit for USA from 103.1 to 103. And even in India, right, we are talking about a larger dip for around zero point 0.4 units, right, in India. So the reason, essentially, RGN team is the same that we saw in some of the IT standard services, right? So there's definitely a growing, cost pressure, right, considering the economic situation. There's also an easing wage inflation, right, that we are seeing. There are some hiring freezes also, that we are currently seeing across some of the leading service providers, and especially on the BPO. Services area, we are also seeing a lot of vendor consolidation deals. Currently, I mean, in the past, 2 to 3 months, right? In fact, we are working on a lot of vendor consolidation projects and a lot of conversations, right, across some of these enterprises, and some of these vendor consolidation deals, right, because of the overall scale, they tend to push the pricing down, right? So some of these reasons are essentially transpiring and suggesting that pricing going forward for the next 12 months should actually decrease marginally for now. Okay. I'm sure everyone is keen to now know when exactly the pricing index will be released. So let's go into the next screen. Yeah.
Yep. So, as this slide shows, we plan to release, the H1 2023 version of the pricing index in a few days from now, essentially sometime in late July, the current month. Just as a recap, what this will cover is the actual movement of prices from H1 of 2022 to H1 of 2023 for the six locations that we talked about earlier and the three service categories. It will also have the projected price movement between now till H1 of 2024. And the release will be made available on the website of Everest Group. Essentially, you can there's a link that you would see in the comment section. You can click on that link, register yourself, so that you get access to the report when it gets released.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, with regard to the frequency of the updates,
Yeah.
I'll,
Sure. Thanks, RJ. The once the H1 2023 version is released, post that, you can expect that the pricing index will be released every 6 months. We plan to follow a July and January cadence. And a similar release event will be hosted before each instance. So that there's discussion, there's also maybe some key takeaways, because this time we've discussed the takeaways reflective as of today. I'm sure in January we don't know which way things go, and then there could be multiple things which are different. So we want to make sure we keep this interactive, and then also readers can request a complimentary briefing basis any questions that they have, or any further details that they might want to go into, right? Just again a reminder, please do click on the link shared in the comment section in order to receive a notification once the H1 2023 pricing index is released. So honestly, we are truly excited and look forward to releasing the pricing index. On a lighter note, I often wonder if I had such an index handy earlier on in my career, when I used to do a lot of business cases or projections of movements. But yeah, I think, now is a good time as well. In all fairness, it's not intended to be an answer for every question, right? It doesn't cover every location or every service, but it is definitely something which can be tracked as a barometer of pricing direction, right? As always, we'd welcome conversations once this is released to get feedback, speak on any of the underlying factors, nuances. So yeah, look forward to that.
Totally agree, Abhishek, right? This could potentially help the overall outsourcing industry with a practical index to track pricing and aid in, pricing related decision making. So yeah, very excited on this.
Yep, and I can also vouch for that. All of us here on the call, as well as the SMEs who are there in our respective teams, tracking the pricing for IT and BPO services, all looking forward to this first release of the pricing index. To all the audience out there, after we release the index, it would be great to see the reactions, kudos, or feedback coming from you, and want to reiterate that you can request for a complimentary briefing as well to understand the trends better from us or to discuss any other related topics. Uh, and before we sign off for the day, just having one final look at the questions that have come up. One question is there a way to get a transcript of this talk afterwards? Yes, absolutely. You can log on to our website, and there'll be a link which will take you to the recording of this session, and the transcript will also be available on that.
I think there's a question around the breakdown of index between industries. I think that's a good question. Unfortunately, that's not the plan. Also, getting an industry, just given variances even between one client relationship with a provider and another client relationship with a provider in the same industry, it sometimes becomes difficult to provide that. But having said that, this is where once it's released, if there are specific questions around any trends or any broad themes which may be reflecting in a particular industry, we'll be more than happy to want to have a one-on-one briefing conversation to talk through about that. Now, will there be a numerical index on that? Perhaps not. But if there's a conversation around if we can share any ready insights on a particular sector we track, we'll be more than happy to do that.
All right. Uh, well, I think uh, one final time, thanks to everyone who has joined in today. As mentioned a few minutes ago, we will send a notification to the participants who have clicked on the link once the pricing index is released, and then looking forward to connecting with you post that. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.